this all for ya?
You're listening to Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast. I will do one episode for each song the band recorded in the studio. However, this is a fan podcast and not band endorsed. It's more of a tribute to their long history, well beyond just the hits, and my way of giving something back to a band that has given so much to me. Let's dig in! Hello and welcome to another episode of Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast. This is Season 5, Episode 3. We're talking about the iconic song, Child in Time. Killer track from Deep Purple comes in on the album at 10 minutes and 15 seconds. And I have a little something special to play as well for you guys. So I expect this to be a slightly longer than normal episode. I used to break these things into multiple episodes, but podcast players now, you can save your spot. If you jump to another podcast and go back to this episode, it should be, wherever you left off. So there's not as much need to do that as there used to be. Plus, since I'm doing a YouTube upload, I also have to convert these to video and re-export them. So the time involved for rendering is quite a bit longer than it used to be. The way it worked with my old distributor was you could actually just download a video version of the podcast that would have the logo on it, very similar to what you're getting with this show. But this distributor doesn't offer that. So it's a little more time consuming on my end, but I get a lot of listens on YouTube, so it's worth the time doing it. But to export 3 videos to do, to keep it around, 20, 25 minutes each or whatever, became kind of cumbersome and really unnecessary now with the new podcast player format. So anyway, if you guys would prefer I go back to that, let me know. But I think it's good for where we're at now. So Child in Time, yeah, killer track. I think I mentioned in an earlier episode, this was played very interestingly during the destruction of the Berlin Wall, which is really cool. I mean, that is just a huge compliment to you as a musician to say, we're taking this moment that we all know is historic. It's going to be filmed and relived over and over again for decades, if not centuries to come. And we want your music to be a part of it. I mean, that is pretty cool. But how did the song come together? Did Deep Purple write it? I don't know. Let's find out. We're going to go back to 1988, and Deep Purple, well, 4 of the 5 members of Deep Purple, John, Ian, Roger, and Ian, were on Rockline promoting the live album Nobody's Perfect when hosted by Bob Coburn. What a great host, killer voice for radio. Sad loss to the community that he's no longer with us, but Rockline was such a cool show. And I talked about this a little bit on the Hush episode with Corey Morissette. But the thing that was really cool about it was that you got to connect with bands that, they were out of reach at the time. There was no social media. There was no... at best, you could send them a letter, and maybe when they got back from their tour, they would get it and, send you a pin or something like that. But you really couldn't connect with artists very often. It was a dream to be able to do that. So to be able to call into Rockline and actually speak to them was a pretty damn cool thing. I was never able to reach them. I remember when we were in Detroit. I don't remember what my questions were, but I remember when we were in Detroit, we couldn't get through. They had so many people in the Detroit area calling. But they were also in Detroit, like physically in Detroit, because that was right before I saw them play for the first time, my first big concert on the Perfect Strangers tour. When we moved to Colorado, I think my call just never got answered. And you got to think, there's probably thousands and thousands of people calling into these numbers to try and get through and talk to the band because it was national. I think they had affiliates in Canada as well, if I remember right. But yeah, they did, because they had some in the Toronto area, people that were calling in. So you had basically North America. That's a lot of people to be fans of Deep Purple and calling in to try and talk directly to these guys. And what was fun about it too is I've gotten very comfortable speaking to various celebrities through all the interviews I've done through the Haskincast podcast, people I've met in the music industry, in the film industry, etc. But it's fun listening to these people because it's like they know they're on national radio. They've got the time pressure. Like, I got to hurry up and get my question in because they're trying to get in as many people as possible. the show's only an hour. Then you got, oh my God, I'm talking to these people that are huge influences on me and people who I admire and love their music. And they've been a part of my life. And now I get to talk. Like, there's so many things going on. People talk a lot about when someone, say, goes on a game show. Now, I used to watch game shows a lot growing up. One that I watch now is called The Floor, hosted by Rob Lowe. Really cool show. I love the concept. I love that they've adapted a lot of the things and helped it. And they're now in season 3. So you go back to season 1. It's like, okay, I see what they were doing. Season 2, they're like, this didn't work. Let's change it. Season 3, they're like, now let's up the game. I really like that. And it's really interesting because the category that you have to answer questions about, it's not just about what the category is. It's how the questions are presented. It's how your recall is in that moment. It's how nervous you are. It's how confident you are in the subject matter. It's whether one question just blows everything and you just can't recover from that because now you're second guessing your thoughts. Like, there's so many things that go into it. And I see like people online talking about, how, oh, I can't believe they couldn't think of that answer. Or how did they not know this? Or I would have known that or whatever. Until you're up there on that podium in that moment, under that pressure, you have no idea what it's like to be there. So I'm going to go to Rockline and we're going to play a question that a caller asked about Child in Time. But before I get to this and before I forget, I'll just read the extensive liner notes on the inside jacket of my In Rock vinyl. It says, Child in Time, the story of a loser. It could be you. Okay. That kind of contradicts a little bit about the story I heard. And I can't remember if it was Ian Gillan or Roger Glover that talked about it, but the actual title of the song was supposed to be Child, in Time. It was supposed to be like a letter to an offspring, if you will. But it wasn't printed that way. So it just became Child in Time. Kind of interesting. And if you look at the lyrics, it kind of does read like a letter to a loved one. So I get that. But if that's the case, the liner notes make no sense for that whatsoever, unless you really have shitty kids. So let's go back to 1988. Here's Rockline.
We go back to the phones now. It's an evening with Deep Purple on Rockline. We go to Costa Mesa, California for this call from Doug. He's listening to 95.5 KLOS. Doug, good evening.
How you doing?
Hi, Doug. Everybody's doing great.
How are you?
Yeah, Doug.
Yeah.
Actually, we're doing very well.
Great. Hey, guys. It's great to be talking to you.
Hi, Doug.
My question's for John. In 1981, while in Okinawa, Japan, I had the pleasure to watch many sessions of George Murasaki and the rock group Okinawa perform the songs of Deep Purple, in particular the song Child in Time. This ballad is, in my opinion, a superb but underrated song. My question is, what inspired the writing of this song, and will it be included in your upcoming tour?
Child in Time? You're asking me?
Yes, John.
You ought really to ask Ian, who is the janitor who keeps this song clean.
Is it Doug?
Yes,
Doug.
it's Doug.
Do you mind if I answer this question, Doug? I'm Ian Gillan. This song was inspired by a group called It's a Beautiful Day and a song called Bombay Calling. And when we were rehearsing in a back room in West London, John came in one day, John Lord, who perhaps you should really be speaking to. Came in one day and said, have you heard this song by It's a Beautiful Day? And he sat down at the organ and went, dun, 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 dun. And we kind of jammed around it and slowed it down, and I started wailing and whatever. It's an interesting story, actually, because Child in Time was born out of that very idea and inspiration. And these days, I guess, we'd be sued to hell for ripping off someone's idea. But it wasn't a rip-off, it was an inspiration. And some years later, we met these guys in an airport in the United States somewhere. And they said, well, we really enjoyed your version of Child in Time, and you should listen to our new album because we ripped off Wring That Neck. Right? And they did because they had a violin in the band, right?
David LaFlamme.
David LaFlamme, yeah.
That's right. And it was a beautiful long-term sequence of events, and very, very natural in those days to be inspired by music and not be sort of worried about where it came from and where it was going and lawsuits and that sort of stuff. I didn't get entirely the gist of your whole question, but...
and will it be in the show?
And will it be in the show? Well, the other thing I have to say, as the singer of the song, that I'm terrified of this song. It was lyrically and emotionally so ethereal and hard to grasp that at the time we did it, it was great. And I reckon about 1 out of every 6 performances, I can grab a hold of the song. And I dread doing it. I'd say to the guys every night, we're not going to do Child tonight. We're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. And guys, yeah, we've got to do it. We've got to do it. We've got to do it. But it's not like Smoke on the Water or Highway Star or any of those other songs we do. It's so hard to grasp. When it's good, it's great.
And the answer is yes.
Well, that was Ian Pace. I'm sorry, but it's a passionately, it's a love affair, that song.
And there's a great, almost 11-minute version of it on Nobody's Perfect that you'll be able to enjoy, Doug. And thanks for the call.
As I recall, the version on Nobody's Perfect is really good. Again, you know, I always preface that with I'm not really a live album guy, but I did have, and I did have a cassette copy of that when it came out, and then I have the vinyl copy now of Nobody's Perfect. And I haven't listened to it in a while, but I do recall enjoying it. The version on Made in Japan is absolutely killer. I mean, it's, you know, the band in their youth, in their prime, and at top peak performance in those shows. So if you're going to listen to a live version, listen to the Nobody's Perfect version for sure. But I would suggest going back and listening to the Made in Japan classic live track of Child in Time. So let's get into the song, guys. Pretty amazing history for this song. One that I think audiences miss in the live set, and certainly understandable that it would be very difficult to perform now, but it still remains a fantastic song, not only in Purple's history, but just in music history in its entirety. So here it is, guys. Deep Purple, Child in Time. Great playing from John Lord there. I'd like how in the very beginning they really weren't tight together. It was just kind of like, we all know what we were playing, just start it, we'll figure it out. And then they very quickly got in sync with each other. And again, guys, no metronomes, no click tracks, no quantizing. This is real people playing music live. And I love that, because this just kind of backs up the reality of the way music was recorded back then. But it's a beautiful solo from John. I've always enjoyed that. I mean, it's we're 48 seconds in before we get to vocals. That's quite a lengthy time for a song this long, but it's a beautiful intro, and everyone else is kind of building. You hear, you know, Ian Pace just adding a little more as it goes on. Richie just keeping a very, very nice rhythm with Roger, and then of course John with the solo. Just absolutely beautiful. This is composing and performing from feeling, as opposed to, oh, we have to do this, or this is what music theory tells us to do, or here's what people will like. This really feels like they just sat down and this is what they felt, so this is what they played.
Sweet child in time, you'll see the line that flying man shooting at the world. Bullets flying, taking toll. If you've been bad, oh Lord, I bet you have. And you've not been hit by a flying lead. You better close your eyes. Oh, bow your head. Wait for a ricochet.
What a beautiful performance. I love that they didn't use any distortion on the organ, that it's just a nice, clean, warm sound, kind of really heading up the melody because it's the notes are sustained, whereas what Roger and Richie are playing are the bass notes of it. Roger's playing at a very high register here, so you're not getting a lot of low end bass as you might think that you would want to balance it out, but it sounds good as it is. Ian Pace kind of just keeping the momentum of the song going because he's the only one that's doing anything that's kind of, rhythmic and a little bit, I guess you'd say kind of adventurous, as much as you could be in a piece like this without going overboard. But he's the only one that's providing like something constant. Everybody else is like, John's holding the notes, but he's not doing anything interesting or, to keep that tempo. So absolutely really cool, beautiful vocal delivery, obviously, from Ian Gillan. And now we get to, just gets amazing from here. Now, this part is broken into 3 sections. We're obviously going to build a little more intense on each one, but I just want to kind of stop here and appreciate this for what it is, because we've got Ian doing a dual track vocal here. Sounds absolutely beautiful. The music is very just supportive. It doesn't need to stand out, really doesn't need to do anything except support the vocal. We're not getting any words. We're just getting feeling. So other than the vocal kicking up a notch, musically, they're really not doing anything. It's just heavier. They're playing it in a way that makes it sound bigger. It's more intense, but the performance of it isn't really anything different note-wise than what they were playing before. It's just bigger. When people listen to this album for the first time, hearing Deep Purple Mark II, deciding whether, Ian Gillan was a good fit, Roger Glover was a good fit for the band. If anybody had any questions about Ian Gillan, certainly by this point of the album where I stopped it right here, there would be no question about his abilities. The power, it's not the scream, because this isn't really even a scream. It's just a higher pitched note. And beautiful vibrato, very expressive. You could sing the note on the page, or you could sing, as they said in Mr. Holland's Opus, you can sing the sunset. And here he is definitely singing the sunset. There is so much emotion coming off of the vibrato and that vocal. It isn't just about the note, it's the power, it's how it feels. And it feels so intense to me. Like there's something inside him that's just so frustrated, trying to get out and just get it out of his system, but share with the world, hey, you need to pay attention to what's going on here and why I'm frustrated. That's what I've always gotten out of it from the first time I heard it, before I had any inclination of what the song was about. Just incredibly powerful. And of course, now the music has escalated to yet another level of intensity. Again, they're not really playing anything different. It's just, again, just thicker and bigger. And now the band is just going to take off from here. This next section, I won't stop it right after this section, but this is pretty iconic. Lots of bands have used this beat count. Deep Purple's used it. I was trying to think before I started recording, I was trying to think what other songs they had used it in, and it just wasn't coming to mind. But when we get to it, I think we did already, maybe on one of the songs. I can't remember now. I'm sorry. But if we get to it again, if it hasn't come up yet, or might be another time they've done it, I'll point it out. But this is a pretty iconic beat, or not beat, count, I should say. Now these, you guys know I don't really like to interrupt solos, but these are very, very long passages. So I kind of just wanted to break in here and talk about what we've heard so far. Richie is on fucking fire, just absolutely on fire in this whole segment, this whole song, really. I mean, this is just a passion just pouring out of the guitar. And I love that it feels so natural. Like I can't imagine him playing anything else that would fit this more. But it's also because I've heard this so many times and I'm very comfortable with it, and it's all part of the song to me. But he's just on fire. And when I listen to this, I feel the same passion that I was getting out of Ian Gillan, where, you know, what I was talking about before with just that I've got to get this out of my system. This is all pent up. I've got to let it out. I'm feeling the same way from what Richie's playing here. And, you know, when you listen to the live version, it's really no different. He really just finds his place in this song, every version I've ever heard of it. And that is super cool. But also, guys, it's so, I say this because this is a band that I really feel, and one of the reasons that I wanted to cover this band on a podcast was because there's so many things going on besides the solo. We've always got great soloists playing on all these songs, because these guys are fantastic musicians. They're fantastic at connecting with a song, feeling the music, expressing themselves, all of that. But the thing is that there's more than one person, right? So while we're focusing on Richie's solo and we're feeling that, you know, that shuffle behind it, it's really easy to miss so much that's going on, because like Ian Pace is playing away, Roger is just rocking it out on the bass, you know, John's supporting the background and the thickness of the overall sound of the song. I feel like it's so easy to miss out on so many things. So I've said before, and I can't remember if it was on this podcast or not, but I said it on the Haskincast podcast and Uriah Heep, the Magicians podcast before. My friend Nash in Australia, really awesome guy, said to me once, if you really want to learn a piece of music, follow one instrument, listen to it over and over until you know everything that instrument's doing. then move on to the next instrument and do the same thing until you know everything that one's doing. And I feel like this is one of those songs that it would be really good to do that with. I could say this about a lot of Deep Purple songs, but this song in particular, like listen to what Ian Pace is doing. Got so many cool things going on that he's playing. Yes, he's backing up Richie's solo, but he's also really colorful in what he's doing. It's almost like a solo section for him, but not quite a drum solo. Then you've got Roger just so solid. You know, you could just lock on that groove and really get into what he's playing. And same with John. So I feel like this is one of those songs that I would highly recommend going back and listening to over and over, even if it's just this section or the solo sections of the song, and really appreciate what every band member is doing here. I mean, it's a little over 2 minutes of guitar solo, and passionate guitar solo at that. I mean, I can imagine so many people hear this and they're like, man, I want to be a rock musician. Like, how do you not get all pumped up listening to something like this, right? It's just, it's passionate, it's on fire, it's full of energy, it's explosive, it's everything that Richie wanted to be on this album. And he delivered it in spades. And now we come to the part where the band kind of regroups a little bit before we head into a little bit of a breakdown. Again, another very commonly heard progression, but very, very just easy, and it feels good. It's very natural, simple, but intricate and exciting. A great way for the band to come together after Richie's solo and just kind of bring everything together as we're about to go back down to the way the song started. Really important when you're writing and recording a piece of music that you pick the pitches carefully. And it's interesting, you know, Roger, I commented in the beginning section that Roger was a little hard to hear because he was playing in a register that blended more with the other instruments. And now he's dropped down to a lower octave and he's really cutting through. And I feel like, you know, the way that he's picking the strings is pretty hard. And it's really like you're getting that almost the pick sound coming through as well. It's got an edge to it this time, but yet the music can still be gentle. John's playing is a little more excited than it was in the beginning, where he was just kind of setting things up. And now I feel like after Richie's solo, he's like, all right, now it's my turn again. And even though the setting behind him isn't very aggressive, I feel like he's really, like, I don't know if you could almost say inspired by Richie's playing to write what he wrote here. I don't know how it all came about, but in the progression of the song, just listening to it as the song, that's how it feels to me. You know, like I opened it up, you took it from here, and now that you've done that, here's how I feel. And then he puts that into this performance.
Sweet child in time, line that's drawn between good and bad. See the blind man shooting at the world, but it's flying, taking toll. If you've been bad, Lord, I bet you have, and you've not been healed by flying lead. You'd better close your eyes. Bow your head. Wait for the ricochet.
I forgot to point out when this came in the first verse, but you'll notice Ian says "Wait for the Ricochet," which was the title of one of the versions of Speed King. Talked about that in episode 1 of this season on Monday. But I really like that on the first verse of this, in the beginning of the song, that Roger picked a higher octave to play on and then dropped it down here for this final verse, because it makes the song sound bigger and more important, right? Now we're getting a full scope of sounds between low end, mid range, and high end. We've got a thicker sounding rhythm section. It just sounds more important, more, I guess, just better to me. But I like that that he did it 2 different ways, because that makes the opening more gentle. And now that we've been through all this with the solos and the excitement and all that, makes this feel more dramatic. Dramatic is the word I was looking for. There you go. Ian talked in the Rockline clip about being terrified of this song, and I could understand that, as especially as you get older, it gets harder and harder to perform some of these parts. But obviously, coming off of Black Sabbath, Born Again, which was only a couple of years before this time frame when they were on Rockline, it's kind of hard to imagine he would be terrified of anything as a vocalist. But to me, it could have easily been more just really being respectful of the song, being able to portray the emotion of the song. Because really, yes, you're a singer, but you're also a bit of an actor too in this, being able to express the emotion, get the audience to connect with how it's supposed to feel. And to be able to lock in on that every night might not be the easiest thing. It's the difference between singing the note and singing the sunset. And he might have felt, and this is what I really gather he meant by that statement, is that he couldn't necessarily sing the sunset every night. That is a lot to ask of somebody to connect to in a song like this, let alone maybe the challenge of the performance. But if you don't feel like you're able to do it, it's really going to be hard to convey to an audience that you can't. So I get that. Again, we've just got this intense, beautiful music build right here. Absolutely love it. We're back to the gritty organ, which I think is really important for this part. If he was just using the clean organ, it would not sound as powerful. So I really like the choice to bring in the beast here. But also, I noticed in parts of this, Ian's second vocal track isn't quite lining up with the first track. So we're getting a little bit of just disconnect in the vocal. And I think that's really important. I think that brings out another level of the emotion. Now we're talking the end of the song. We've been through the solo as the one who's telling the story. You're maybe mentally exhausted. Maybe you're reinvigorated with a newer level of frustration, whatever it might be. But I feel like just singing it that way, because he could have easily sung it, twice, duplicated the track and been fine with that, or even used a duplicator to do that. But instead, the choice to make it different, and not in all spots, but just to take a couple of selected spots and make it different, I think is really important in delivering the level of emotion that he's talking about. And there's another thing to consider, because you can't do that live. You get your vocal track unless you're playing to tracks, which in '88, I don't know if anyone was doing that. I mean, there were some people that were playing to like triggered stuff, because you could do that with like a Simmons drum set. You could put it to a trigger and it would trigger an audio thing, which people got caught doing if they hit it at the not perfect time. But in fact, I remember that happened to Phil Collins. But so there is that to consider. Like, there's so many reasons that you wouldn't want to do the song live, and I get that. So it's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff to really pay attention to, and to try and recreate this on stage. It's honestly, it's a pretty bold move to even perform the song live at all. One thing I want to point out too is, so you've got Ian singing these very high notes, very passionate, full power. Then he drops down into his voice and says the line, "I want to hear you sing." Then he goes back up to the higher ranges, right? When I used to try and sing the song, and I don't know how other singers feel about this, I'm sure people that are trained and really know how to use their voice may not have this issue. But for me, if I sang that line, if I dropped down from the higher notes, if I dropped down and sang, "I want to hear you sing," did I say scream earlier? I might have. "I want to hear you sing." "I want to hear you scream" was from Serpent in the Rainbow, which was a great line. But if I dropped down and sang that, I did not have the ability to go back into that higher range and sing with the same power I did. And I found that I burnt my voice out a lot more quickly. If I sang it without that line, I could sing the whole way through. Now, it may not have been good. Okay, I'm not a singer. I'm not trained in that. But I would say back in the day when I had vocal range, I would say about one out of every maybe 20, 25 times I felt pretty good singing this song. Always in the car where there were no witnesses, except for one time in Vegas where I was with my brother. I think it must have been the second time, because we were in his car. So the first time we flew, second time we drove. So it must have been then. I remember we were driving by the Luxor and this came on and I was singing it. And it was like the one time I really nailed it. But I mean, anybody can get lucky at some point, or you just like your throat's just in that right spot or whatever. But in any case, I found that interesting, because it was that dropping down into my voice and singing that one line that prevented me from being able to sing the rest. So I don't know. I don't know how other singers feel about that. I'd be curious to know. I love how there's so many songs with like one extra bass drum from Ian Pace, where it's just kind of disconnected from everything else, and he just hits it that one more time. We've seen that a couple times since Ian and Roger joined the band. But man, what an ending! A huge flourish, just a big cacophony of sound. Ian Gillan just exploding, the whole band just, it's mind blowing. It's so hard to describe what we just heard. But what I can say is that it was an amazing dramatic ending to an incredibly powerful and beautiful piece of music. I just love that. Almost, it's not quite a wash of reverb at the end, but it does have that, feel to it where we're almost like in a tunnel of sound. And it just kind of carries out beyond what people are playing, which is really nice. And then there's those last few notes from Richie as that washes out. Absolutely killer. Absolutely killer. Just so high energy, so passionate. Why it's such a favorite, I think, for people. Yes, it's iconic because Ian hits some pretty incredible notes. He sustains them very well. That certainly makes it popular. But honestly, and it's catchy. Dun, dun, dun. It's very catchy and very simple. And those things will always attract people. But the overall, like when you look at the song on the whole, the power, the intensity, the emotion, it's such an amazing piece of music. The solo, the everything, just an amazing track. And I think that's what makes it, to me at least, one of the most important tracks in their catalog, because they showed what a rock band can really do. And again, this is like late 69, early 70 when they're writing this. So it's so hard to think about what didn't exist that we know now in that time. We didn't have Atari. We had pinball machines. We had games that were, made of wood and used water to power cars and things like that. It's a whole different world back then. So to think about how innovative this was, how cutting edge to write something this hard, how tough it would be for engineers to adapt this kind of music, because it wasn't like, they've been doing this kind of rock and roll for a long time. It was figuring out how to make it sound good, how to make it sound really powerful without clipping and distorting where they didn't want it. I mean, this was a tough time for audio engineers to make music sound good. They had to learn how to do it very, very quickly. Martin Birch was one of those people that helped figure that out. And so grateful that he connected with Deep Purple and would obviously work with Rainbow and Whitesnake and all that. Now, he was not Martin the Wasp Birch on this one. He was just Martin Birch, but still a very powerful person in the world of music. So many things had to come together to make this album work. But I feel like this song is really a testament to what was possible that just hadn't been tapped into yet. If you put in the work, if you believe you can do it, and you just don't settle for, no, we can't do that, or I don't know how to make that happen, or there's no way this is going to happen, or whatever words might have been flying around at the time. And not just with them. I mean, I think that part of the reason that creativity gets limited is because people don't think they have the means to express it to the level they want to. So thinking about this time, yes, we had some hard rock stuff, but this is like so next level. And I feel like so many other bands that might have had the desire to do something like this might have dialed back and said, yeah, there's no way that we're going to be able to record that and make it sound good on record, or, people aren't going to buy it. They're not going to understand, like whatever excuses they might make for not just pushing through and saying, no, we're doing this. This is what we want it to be, and we're going to find a way to make it happen. And I feel like this was an album that was probably a challenge from beginning to end to make it sound as good as it does. And there's a difference between like mixing and whatever the hell passed for mastering back then, and just, getting the production balance, getting the feel of the song right, and then making it sound good, because that's a whole nother issue. But in any case, what we get, the final product, and it all worked out. They hung in there, they made it all happen and made it work, because this is a fantastic sounding album. This song, there is absolutely nothing, as a very picky audio engineer, there is absolutely nothing I would want different about this song. If I had the ability to mix these tracks, if somebody handed me all the individual instruments and said, mix this, I would put the album on and I would just duplicate that. I would mix it so it sounded like this album, because there's nothing I would change whatsoever. And I feel like it's so rare that I say that, because there's always like, well, I could use a little more kick drum, or I could use a little bit more bass, or I wish they'd pan this way or that way or whatever. Nothing. I wouldn't change a damn thing on this album. And that says a lot. So, and I can honestly say that about a lot of Martin Birch's productions. I'm sure that will be a theme that I will return to many times during this podcast, because if there's one thing that Deep Purple often had, not always, but often, it was a great mix. So anyway, guys, Child in Time, what an epic song, killer track, 45-minute podcast. Just so much to cover and think about and explore with a song like this. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Go back and listen to the song, listen to each instrument, listen to it till you really feel you know it. Then just sit back, get all that out of your head, and then just listen back to the song on the whole again, knowing what the parts are, knowing what everybody's putting into it, knowing the effort and the exhaustion and the passion and everything that you're hearing in these notes. I bet you'll appreciate it on a whole new level. I know I do. So you guys have a wonderful day. We'll be back tomorrow for episode 4. We're starting side 2 of Deep Purple in Rock, believe it or not. I mean, Child in Time takes up such a big chunk of real estate on side A that there's only so much that you can get on a record. And we'll be back for side B tomorrow. Have a great day, guys. Cheers. Thanks for listening to Deep Purple Smoke on the Podcast, a tour of the entire Deep Purple studio recordings. Please remember to give the show a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. Leave a comment and tell your friends. I also have a Patreon set up if you'd like to support the show. You can also write to me at smokeonthepodcast@gmail.com. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and thanks for listening.